Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Card Talk podcast where we spend just a little bit of time talking about the worst scenarios in the game. I'm your host, Dave Walsh.
And I'm Ted Bannock, and I love talking about the best, worst scenarios in the game.
And I'm Matt Kell, blogmaster of CardTalk2018.com, where I review the card pool one card at a time.
Maybe, Ted, to your point, maybe we should say the best scenarios to avoid.
Yeah.
Is that good?
Yeah. So I'm actually pretty excited. We're going to have a great show for today's episode, and it's going to be interesting. It deviates a little bit because we're going to be talking about encounter cards, right? Which we do occasionally.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep. And just so everybody knows how this works, during our Extravaganza month, we try to bring you something new and different that's not kind of our standard content, and we decided to poll the five members of the Card Talk crew. Micah and Grant aren't with us today, but we have Ted and Matt, obviously, and so I just asked a whole bunch of questions, like what are the best heroes, worst heroes, best cards, worst cards, everything. And so today we're gonna take in our opinions about what the worst 5 scenarios of the game are. And by worst, we just mean, not ones that we typically would replay, probably. Well, I don't know.
Agree with that.
Yeah. I think a good way to measure it is what scenarios are like the least fun. Right? Isn't that how we rate it the worst? And they're going to be not fun because they're either incredibly difficult, right? So you have to like very specifically deck build, and even then you're not guaranteed a victory. Which is fun for some people too. Like I love playing nightmare stuff because you have to very specifically deck build. It's like a puzzle, right? As well as being strategic in your actions.
Right. Even more of a puzzle than the regular mode, right?
Right, exactly.
Right.
So I think it's a combination of what is difficult, and also a lot of it's going to come down to mechanics that are either muddy, not fun, and maybe because they're too random, right? Or some encounter cards just have, if they were early on, like maybe their design is not so great. Right? I think the encounter cards design definitely improved over time as the designers got more experience with the game. And so some of the cards are just like a big, it's like either stop this card or you have a huge penalty. Right? Your heroes are dead.
It became less hit or miss, right? When you're just launching not only a new game, but a whole new genre of games, like cooperative card game, right? Which Lord of the Rings was on the forefront of. It's hard to, so you try everything at the beginning, and then you can kind of laser focus down to like what's good, right? So, and so maybe a lot of these are going to be from the beginning, but some are not.
On some of those early card designs, I could see like the Magic the Gathering DNA, where it's like, oh, this is supposed to be like the global damage, or oh yeah, this is the the creature removal that is standard in those sorts of decks when you're playing against someone. But you usually have a lot of ways to counter them, or you can reasonably expect based on the meta like what's coming up. But with the co-op game and the theme, like a lot of people just wanted to play certain things and not fine-tune a deck to beat a specific scenario. And so sorts of things were anti-fun because they interfered with what the person wanted to do.
Anti-fun. I love that.
Yeah.
Well, then let's get into this. There was only one scenario that 3 of us agreed. Everything else was 2 or just one person throwing out. And some of it just may be play style, right? Like some scenarios don't go into the play style that people like to do and things like that. But the top one was Journey to Roscoble, right? And so the Journey to Roscoble or Roscabel or Roscabel or however you want to pronounce it, is the one where you're supposed to save Williador, and Williador takes damage every round, and then you have to go and find all the Ethelos from the encounter deck, and it becomes, that's the problem with it, right? It's like, even though you win the game, you don't have enough Ethelos to save the bird, and you still lose the game, right? Like, and the encounter deck is like 158 cards, so like
and every one of them says take damage.
Right. And so it's like, even though you win the game, you don't win the game, which is very frustrating. And it wasn't corrected in the Nightmare version of it.
Yeah, the Nightmare version, they changed a couple of cards to help make the Atlas more accessible, I think. There was also... I think there was an FAQ too that did something with like the objective cards that helped it.
Like if it gets discarded, it goes back into the staging area and stuff.
Something like that. But it's not like, I never want to take it out of the box and be like, let's play Journey to Roscoe so I can play my dwarf. Like, it's just You're not going to do that,
right?
Because you have to build so specific.
And then it has that extra mechanic where you on the second stage is that if you heal, you have to discard the thing that heals whatever you're using your heal. Yeah, like so like if you use Lembus to heal, that already discards itself. But if you use Warden of Healing to heal something, you have to discard the Warden of Healing. So like it's just not a very well rounded scenario, and that suffers from the beginning. Like we said, it's one of the first scenarios in the game, and it's just I like the idea of rescuing one of the Great Eagles. I think that seems to be a really cool idea, and I like that it keeps taking damage, but the win condition alone is what makes it really not right there. So I'm actually going to just executively put this on the list.
Yeah,
I'm just going to put.
No one's arguing with you,
right? And then
it did make my list, but Journey to Roscabel was like the last of the Shadows of Mirkwood cycle I got, and I got it way late in the game. Like Fringes of Mordor was coming out when I got it.
Oh, and you regret buying it ever since?
I mean, I played around it, and I got extremely lucky one time when I played it. Like I beat it in like 4 or 5 rounds.
Oh, jeez. You got all the Ethelos that early, huh?
I got like 1 or 2.
Oh, right. You just have to heal it. Heal the.
And if you swap in that one location on stage 1, you can like power through real fast. It's kind of forgettable for me, to be honest.
Right. And then the other one that I think goes on the list that isn't a fun factor, but just a design snafu, was Assault on Osgiliath, which
that made my list too, because of the auto win when playing solo.
You could play solo and you can just beat it on setup, which is kind of an interesting thing. I think Matt and I put it on our list because of that. I mean, I hate to put something on the list because it was just designed incorrectly, but I also think that that's the point of this game. If you're playing solo and you can win on setup without doing anything.
Yeah, it's just not fun, right? Because you didn't really get to play it. It beat itself.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Right. I mean,
of course, not playing the game is surprisingly not fun.
Yeah. Exactly. And so I very strongly think that should be on the list, just because it was a design mistake, and I think everybody's admitted that. Ted, you didn't put this on the list, but do you where do you fall?
Yeah, and even Yeah, I'm trying to remember if I think if they fixed it in the Nightmare, but
They did fix it in the Nightmare.
I think they
but,
did.
Yeah, but it's not.
But yeah, the vanilla original version is, yeah, it's not great.
Right. And there's another version of that location capture that came out later. So,
Right, Wrath and Ruin, and
Wrath
that
and
one
Ruin.
is a lot of fun.
Right. So, okay. So I'm going to put Assault on Osgiliath here too. Okay. Now I think that it gets interesting because, just a couple scenarios have two of us agreeing, but so it's good to start there. But then it's a free for all. I put Framsburg on the list, and I also put Nin and Eelf on the list. So
I have Nin and Ilf because of the anti-fun mechanic of that, where you just lose progress over and over again. As thematic as it is, it's just like I could see where so many people get frustrated playing this, and I knew it going in, and I was still like, all right, let me restart this quest essentially.
right.
Yeah, it is kind of a slog. I think there's ones that are less fun to play, but it is generally like, yeah, when you're going through it and you get up to that one, if you're playing through that cycle, you're less excited to play it for sure.
Okay. And then what about Framsburg?
Framsburg 2 is, I mean, I beat it in a 2-player game in 23 minutes was my fastest record. Because another friend of mine, Space Bear, is commonly known online, there was a challenge at Con of the Rings to see how fast it could play, and we beat it in like 22 minutes and some odd seconds. It was shocking because like we flipped over, like it has that mechanic. The mechanic is just too random, right? Like whether you get the treasure or loot cards, whatever those are.
Yeah, the objectives.
The objective cards, but then we would hit it and I would like stop in shock. And he's like, "What are you doing? Keep playing." And you just don't expect to hit it, even though that's the whole point of it is to get but it takes too long.
Yeah. My argument for this is that you can win that game in 8 rounds, but you have to play 30 to get through the whole to actually win it. That's my big problem is that that's what makes it unfun for me. This little card talk history here is that I got Framsburg and I said, okay, I'm going to do a blind playthrough of Ghost of Framsburg. I'm going to record it and I'm going to set it out and I'm not going to know anything about the scenario. And it was the longest. The raw video was 3.5 hours. I edited it down to 2, but that's the type of thing. I knew I was going to win, and I had Gladriel and I was, lowering my threat. I think I had 0 threat by the end of the game. And I was just, so to me, when you know you're going to win and you still have to play through to get to that point, that's the problem.
Mm-hmm.
I can see that. I like Ghost of Framsburg, but I knew going in the problems with it and played it with encounter control so I could find those objectives faster. Plus there's kind of the workaround that you can add the shade of Framsburg to the victory display before stage 3 so that you basically skip a whole stage.
Oh, didn't know that.
Yeah, he doesn't have victory points on him printed, so Out of the Wild, Scout Ahead can
just
put him in the victory display.
Deck.
Yep.
Right.
Just take him out of the deck, win on stage 2 or 4 or whatever it is.
Which is
stage 3.
Which actually, if you're playing normally and you take him out, that's the only enemy in that whole deck that has any sort of stats. Everything else is defend, attack back for 3, kill it. The Fram Shade has all the stats, and it's not even that strong. But I don't know. I feel strongly about Framsburg more than Nin and Ilf, but I don't know. Okay, all in favor of Framsburg being on the list
Yep,
before we
aye.
even. Aye. Matt, not Matt.
No,
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 Okay.
I still enjoy that quest, but you know,
Okay.
I build for it.
maybe some other quest will usurp Framsburg. Maybe the three of us. What about Nin being on the list? Nin and Ilf. What do we think?
I agree with that.
Yeah, it is a slog.
I don't like hate it or get angry at it, but I am not going to replay it anytime soon because I just don't like, having to restart my quest over and over again.
Yeah.
It kind of feels like Voyage Across Belagir to me, where it's like I'm just trying to progress through these quest stages, and it's just kind of a boring part otherwise.
Okay. So Framsburg may or may not make the list, but so far it's on the list. I made a mistake on my list that I submitted. I put Race Across Harad because I can't stand that scenario, but I forgot to put Dungeons Deep and Caverns Dim on my list because I hate the riddle mechanic. I think that should be number one on the list of horrible worst scenarios.
Welcome to the top 10 worst scenarios.
Right.
I don't mind it, but I like the deck building challenge.
Yeah, well, that's the thing, though. If you deck build for it, it's easy.
Right.
You're like, cool, I'm going to make a deck that is 40 cards that are all 2-cost leadership allies. Cool, I win.
Right.
Like, you're just going to win. And that also makes it boring.
Right. Well, that's the thing. Like, you build the deck. Like, if you're going to deck build for something, there still should be a chance that, you still shouldn't win 100% of the time, right? Like, you figure out the puzzle and there's still a chance you could lose. But this is one of those where you deck build for it and you're going to win because other than that, it's not. I don't know.
Yep.
So, okay. Let's go through some one-ofs and see if there's anything that's worse than what we got. Okay. Somebody put the Hills of Emyn I like the
that
Hills.
was me.
Yeah, I know. I don't mind the Hills of Emyn and Nightmare makes it even more of a playable scenario.
Yeah, Nightmare helps, even though, again, pretty much all Nightmare you're specifically deck building for, but that's just part of Nightmare, so I think that's okay. But yeah, I see why you put it on the list. It's not as grueling, but it's just one of those earlier scenarios like Roskabel where you're like, okay, yep, I got to include 3 Northern Trackers and 3 Outriders and backtrack. And
yeah, it's just kind of boring. You're just progressing. It's like, all right, that one's done. I don't have to play it again.
Okay. And okay.
This is the discussion. I don't really necessarily hate any particular scenario. Like a lot of them is just like, yeah, this one was boring for me.
Right. Okay, so here's the discussion that I want to have. Okay, Matt put 2 Stormcall or Dream Chaser scenarios on the list. And so Ted, what do you think of the sailing mechanic?
Oh, I don't hate it. I don't mind it. It does. I think it's good, and usually, again, I think a lot of those scenarios are designed well. And if I'm going to play multiplayer, that cycle is the first thing I go to because for whatever reason, the way the setup works, those scenarios are all very multiplayer friendly to play 3-4 players. So yeah, I don't mind it at all, and I think it's pretty balanced because even though you have to exhaust characters to sail, I feel like it's balanced with the encounter threat. It's balanced enough where I like it.
Matt? What's your opinion?
I personally hate it, but that's because you're kind of locked into those character heavy decks, which I tend to shy away from. So if you're trying to do something that's less characters or whatever, you have to include a lot of action advantage and just like even play encounter scrying or whatever doesn't help you that much because there just isn't enough of them to like play around to ensure you could succeed on the sailing tests all the time. And you could just ignore sailing and fail and deal with the worst consequences from the treacheries or whatever. And I've done it. It's not particularly fun because you're just getting hammered over and over again for being off course. So
yeah,
that's why I like the sailing in particular is just, I feel is kind of brutal for me. It's like, I just don't want to quest twice and have to
sure.
deal with the randomness of, did I get the sailing success?
Yeah, I get that. Where I enjoyed the balance is there's some treachery cards that are like, if you're on course, nothing happens. Right? So you're rewarded for sort of staying ahead of the game, which I think some other scenarios lack, where if you're doing a mechanic correctly, you still have a lot of other threats to deal with. Like I think of the hide mechanic in the it's like you have to do the hide stuff and failing is awful, like really, really bad. And then the rest of the quest also hard.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. I think the Dream Chaser cycle is good. It's not my favorite, but I like the Dream Chaser cycle, and so I fall more closely with Ted than I do with Matt for sure. I don't mind the sailing mechanic, like it's another thing to worry about. The one knock that I have on the Dream Chaser cycle, I guess the sailing mechanic is part of it, is just there's so many triggers. Like you just have to keep your board state like in always checking. You're always reading all the cards everywhere because there's just so many triggers going off with the boarding mechanic and like the I don't know sailing, and then this trigger and that trigger and then this location triggers during this, and so that's
boarding is another reason why I don't like the Dream Chaser cycle much at all. Because I play primarily solo like you, Dave, and when it's boarding 3, it's like, yay, 4 enemies to deal with. Thanks.
Yeah, that should be based on player count. That could be fixed. Yeah. Where it's like boarding
X.
like one per player. Right. So if you're in a 3-player game, that particular ship is boarding 3 and that person gets 3 enemies, but you in multiplayer, then you have people with Sentinel or, to help you with it.
Right. Yeah. If they had the Marvel Champions player icon back then,
right,
that would have helped tremendously to be
right.
Like, the scale's much better. Thank you. Yep. Otherwise, it's like, I'm going to play a low threat deck and play the Great Hunt to take out the ships.
Right.
Okay. I mean, I don't see anybody feeling that strongly there. Okay, Ted, you had Flight from Moria, To Catch an Orc, and Druidan Forest.
Yeah. And
give me Flight from Moria.
Flight from Moria, it's like you have to randomly go through the scenario cards to find an escape path, and then there's only 2, and one of them will just like instantly cause you to lose. I remember there's like some condition where it's like if you flip it over, it's like if you have this and this, you escape, but if not, you lose. Very much a Roscabil type thing. So it's just not fun.
My favorite Con of the Rings moment, other than meeting you, Ted, of course, all the time at Con of the Rings, was from Flight from Moria, right? Because that's the one with the quest deck, and you do a random 2 or what the next.
There's multiple like 2.
Yeah. Right. And so we chose the one that said, flip over, if you don't pick a treachery out of here.
That's what it is. That's
And so, but you get a choice. You don't have to do that. You can always just bypass the
You
quest
can
card.
bypass it. Yes.
So we at Con of the Rings were like, we're going to be stuck. So let's just do this. And we were playing 4-player. And I'll be danged that we flipped over 4 cards and none of us picked a treachery. And we won. And I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe it. So one of my favorite Con of the Rings moments is from Flight from Moria. So that's never going to make my list.
Okay, very well.
How about To Catch an Orc? Matt, you don't have an opinion yet.
I was just gonna say, for Flight for Moria is one of those few quests I remember is like you could finish it in under 30 minutes.
Right.
And so that's why I'm kind of like, I will give it that much to where it's not the worst, just because if you need a quick pickup quest, like it's a possibility.
To Catch an Orc, Ted?
Yeah, I remember also too that having some really. I remember just like playing it, and more often than not, like the series of enemies and locations that come up and treacheries would just annihilate me. And then on top of having the random mechanic where it eats some of your own deck, and then you're searching through your own deck to find the orc.
Right.
Right. You have to set aside 20 cards, and you have to put the orc in there along with like a couple of his guards.
Yeah, and that's pretty brutal, right? As we I guess we haven't really talked about. I'm sure someone put Nern on their list, right? If you attack a player's deck, it is the most brutal thing you can do, because those are your tools.
Right.
Yeah, imagine if you're playing Galadriel and all your copies in Nenya are in those 20 cards.
Yeah, that's pretty much it.
It's a good thing we didn't put Galadriel on our list. I don't mind To Catch an Orc, and I've played To Catch an Orc with Galadriel, so
I mean, I don't necessarily mind it either, but I get where that source of frustration can be, because I do remember playing a couple times and just being like, is he the last person or last card in my 20 cards here on the side? Like, where is he? And, it's a slog really to get to that point where it's like, I'm pretty sure I could win this if I could just find him.
Yeah. Yeah, so I don't see To Catch an Orc kind of making the bottom 5 here. What about Druidan Forest, Ted? Quick.
Well, that whole cycle is janky because of the whole the whole like battle mechanic,
Right.
and I remember just Druidan Forest being like the prowl mechanic is so punishing, right? I think there's a reason that it only appears in that one quest.
Right.
It was prowl. Prowl is just so punishing.
And then I think at the end you have to attack with your willpower, right? You're in
all your stats
with woes,
get reallocated to different uses, and so it messes up how you play the game like too much for me.
Right.
Yeah, I think I did okay in that one because I was playing mono tactics and I was generally using my resources every round, so the prowl wasn't doing too much to me, or I was like.
But then there's penalties for that. There's if you get on, there's cards that are like, if you can't pay for prowl, then kill your hero. Like some nonsense.
Yeah, it's been a long time since I've played it, and I think it's also one of the ones that's very archery heavy.
Yes, on top of being lots of archery.
Oh yeah, those woses like to plink you off from a distance, right?
Yeah,
that's another one where I could see it easily making the bottom 5, just because, like, at the anti-fund, like, you want to play your cards. If you can't do that, if you don't have resources, you're holding on to them to avoid the bad stuff.
Yeah. Well, I'll put that off to the side as a possibility. I think it's important that we get to these, the hard ones. So Grant on his list, other than having Roscabel on there, he put Karn Doom, Nirn, Blackgate, Mount Doom. Those were
are like
the 4 hardest quests
in the game.
Right.
Right.
And so
and 2 of those are some of my favorites.
Right. I feel like Karn Doom is like hard, but like a good hard. Like you can make progress and you can go through and you can like you like you feel like you can win that and then all of a sudden you can't. Like so I don't mind Karn Doom. And Nern, like you said, Ted, is one of those that like it takes your deck away from you, right? Like then that sucks.
Yeah.
And I can't see putting the Black Gate and the Mount Doom on there because thematically that's what they have to be.
Yeah.
I couldn't see those being on there. So the only one out of those
Can't just walk into Mordor.
right, right, and so like I don't know if Karn Doom and Nern make the list of the 5 worst compared to kind of the 5 that we're already kind of mulling over here, right? Like
there's definitely satisfying moments in both of those, right? Because you're dealing with recurring villains, and those are your chances to like finally defeat them once and for all. Like Thawdir is a huge thorn in your side throughout Amar Awakened up until that point. And I was like, I really want to take him down so bad. And then Fortress of Nurn, same thing. Like you stretch you all the way back to Heirs of Numenor, bringing in Thane Olcor.
right.
I forget what his name is from Heirs of Numenor, but he betrayed your party and stuff back then and everything, and suddenly he's alive again. Like, plus I enjoy the like storming the castle idea of it, right. And that you're in kind of like Escape from Mount Graham. Like, yeah, it takes your deck away, but you get some of those cards back, and so like you're rediscovering people, getting those things feeling progressively stronger as you go is very satisfying to me.
Yeah. I don't think any of those scenarios are worse than, kind of the 4 or 5 that we've, talked about as kind of universally being on the bottom of the game, right? Like,
I agree.
Like if our list is Roscabel, Assault on Osgiliath, which are kind of set there because of the craziness, but then, Nin and Ilf, Framsburg, and then, Dungeons Deep and Caverns Dim. Like, I mean, is that like, Matt, you may have to suck up and not have a sailing mechanic on the list here, like
one of them made it on the lost episode because Micah reinforced my dislike of sailing. And Voyage Across Belgier, I will say, like, it's just kind of boring. It's all this is teaching you the sailing mechanic, right. And you're just progressing through a lot of quest stages. It's like, whatever.
Well, so does Dungeons Deep, Caverns Dim make the list? I really feel strongly that it should because I can't stand the riddle mechanic.
Yeah, I mean, it is one of those things where if you don't deck build for it, it's gonna really penalize you, and if you do, it makes it almost trivial.
Right.
And that is an unfortunate thing.
I'll channel Micah and bring up Lonely Mountain, since
go ahead.
That one, you only need to get 1 treasure and you can get out, and then Smog can end up attacking like 7 times in a row.
Yeah, that's also pretty. Yeah, like when he chain attacks you 7 times for 7, you're like, it's cool, fun game.
Yeah, it's like I feel like Battle of Lake Town should have been that quest instead in the box.
Is Lonely Mountain, Ted, worse than any of these that we've listed?
Actually, yeah. Even though I talked about Framsburg and Forest, and we talked about Nin and Elf, I feel like actually, yeah, it is pretty bad because you're like, oh, I'm gonna play my thematic dwarf deck to take on Smog. Oh, cool, they're dead.
So
like 6 chain attacks by Smog.
So which one is it? Is it worse then?
I would say probably Nin and Elf. But that's just me.
I mean, Matt, are you okay with that?
I don't know. I still have a soft spot for Framsburg. I think there's still fun moments to be had in that.
Yeah, I remember I wanted to do a thematic Halloween playthrough, so I played Elrond Grey Wanderer solo versus it. Because I wanted Elrond wandering the thing with his torch, and I enjoyed it.
Against a ghost. Well, so I think, Ted, you're suggesting that Lonely Mountain should replace Nin and Ilf on this.
Yeah, but it could also knock off Ramsburg.
But
Because I forgot how
seems,
terrible it is.
I feel like, Matt, which you said Framsburg is better than Nin and Ilf. So you would rather... Is Lonely Mountain worse than Nin and Ilf?
I haven't played Lonely Mountain that much, but I also only played Nin and Elf like a few times as well. And I think the frustration of losing your progress is probably worse than the frustration of losing all your enemies to a big huge dragon, but or all your allies to a big huge dragon. But I don't know, like I get that, remembering what Micah said in our last episode, like, it wants you to burgle all these treasures, but there's really not much reason to, because you only need one to progress. And so there's not a lot to that quest. And the few times we played it, like we were doing the standard decks from the rule book, which are not well suited to it. And like Bala and Hero, who you get in that box, his ability seems like it should be a fix for Smog's random attacks, and it's not.
Right.
So I think maybe Lonely Mountain I think it deserves to be in consideration. I don't know that I would put it. I don't know that I would knock off Nin and Elf for it. Like I would probably knock off Dungeons Deep or
Framsburg. Okay. Ted, would you put Lonely Mountain on the worst list and keep Framsburg off the list?
Yeah, I would actually. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Because even though Framsburg is like a slog, it's not like it can make it unfun, but Lonely Mountain is unfun for very different reasons.
Okay. Which is different than Battle of Lake Town, because Battle of Lake Town feels like you can win that, right? Like it's hard, but you can win it.
Yeah,
like, it feels winnable.
It was super hard when it came out because there was like the card pool was very, very tiny.
Right.
But now once the card pool expanded, you can easily beat it with just smart enough decks. Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, higher defense heroes and more defense boosts, I'm sure helped a lot with that. Because when I played it, like, you put Baragon and give him a Gondorian shield and you're solid. Like that point, all you really need is some action advantage.
Right. But not Baragon, or not Grimbeorn, right? Grimbeorn, our defense. Dyne, you could use Dyne, I guess.
Yeah, and Grimbeorn, you just can't attack back, right? So he's not the ideal choice for that one.
Right. Okay, so here's our list as it sits. It's Journey to Roscabal, Assault on Osgiliath. We didn't have much discussion on those. And then it looks like Nin and Ilf, The Lonely Mountain, and Dungeons Deep and Caverns Dim. Does that summarize the worst scenarios in the game?
I still don't mind Dungeons Deep, Caverns Dim. I think there are worse ones, but I get where you're coming from with the riddle mechanic on that.
Those are the 5 worst in the game.
Ted's we trained Ted to just really after 20 minutes to be done.
I mean, there is unfortunately more that are a bit challenging. We tend to just not take them out of the box to play. But it's a pretty good list what I think we put together. Like I commonly skip those and don't want to play them for different reasons.
Right. They all have different mechanics. And the other thing is that it's hard to pick out a bad quest based on like your play style. Like I don't mind Ebon Muil, but I know that the whole community can't stand Ebon Muil, right? And so like it's just some of it's a play style thing.
Yeah, well, and your experiences too of solo versus multiplayer, like that particular scenario gets hard. Like it's impossible to play 4 players unless every single person's playing Spirit Northern Trackers.
Right. And so I get that. So but I think that these kind of embody kind of universal, not very good, well-designed quests. And just the comparison is when we, on the Lost episode, like Matt was referencing, we had Roscabel, Osgiliath, Dungeons Deep, Lonely Mountain, and instead of Nin and Ilf, we had Voyage Across Belagir to kind of represent the sailing mechanic that Matt and Micah didn't like. So, I mean, the only exception is... And so kind of so we kind of agree here that Nin and Ilf, or we kind of agree 4 out of the 5. So maybe we put Voyage Across Belagir on here with an asterisk, just saying if you don't like sailing.
Yeah, it's easy. You could say it's number 6 or something, right? Like...
Right. Dishonorable mention. I don't know. So okay, there you have it, everybody. Our top 5 is that top 5 least playable scenarios?
Top 5, bottom 5.
Right.
Top 5 scenarios to skip.
Okay, good. Okay, everybody, see you later. Have a great week.
Do you love the content? Here's what you can do to stay connected. Become a patron. The money collected through Patreon goes into keeping the lights on here at the podcast. We love our patrons, and you can join at many different levels. Visit patreon.com/cardtalk2018. You can subscribe to us, whether you're watching our YouTube channel or you're listening to us in your favorite podcatcher. Hit the subscribe button to get notifications of all our new episodes. Didn't know we were an audio podcast? Find us by searching Card Talk to get access to our 120 plus regular episodes. Didn't know we were a video channel? Find us by searching Card Talk LOTR LCG on YouTube. And there you can find not only our regular episodes, but you can find our bonus playthroughs and other content related to the game. Want to get a hold of Ted, Grant, or myself? Feel free to email the podcast at cardtalk2018@gmail.com.